Hello and welcome. I'm Juan Carlos Gamarra, Ambassador of Peru to the United Kingdom, and I'm very pleased to announce a series of podcasts related to our independence process. These podcasts are made to celebrate the Peruvian Bicentennial and will include determining facts and personalities that allowed us to achieve our independence and start a republican life. These productions are given thanks to the collaboration of top-level specialists, academic institutions, and ULatin TV productions. On this occasion, we are connected with Professor Natalia Sobrevilla, who will talk to us about the beginning of our independence process. Natalia Sobrevilla is a professor of Latin American history by the University of Kent. She is PhD in Latin American history by the University of London and has a degree on history by the Catholic University of Peru. She is also Magister in Latin American history and geography by the University of Vienna and has several books, publications, and articles on issues related to Latin American history. I should mention also that Natalia is a direct descendant of the heroine of our independence, Maria Parao de Bellido. So thank you very much, Natalia, for once again being with us at the embassy, and I give you the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. It is my pleasure to be today with you, sharing some history of the process of independence in Peru. It's a bit of an introduction today to talk about how the process began. And the imperial power of Spain started to wane during the Napoleonic Wars. This was the moment when Napoleon took over the Spanish Peninsula and threw the whole imperial system into turmoil. What happened there was that the people of Spain, both in America and in Europe, refused to be under the control of Napoleon and declared that they had to rule themselves and organize self-ruling systems in what they called juntas. In Peru, there was no junta established because the viceroy said, and he had a point, that there was no need for a representative for the king because he was the representative for the king. In other areas, like in Buenos Aires, in Santiago, in New Granada, in several cities of what used to be the New Kingdom of Granada, in Venezuela, juntas were established. And these juntas tended to be there to organize the politics of the period, of the time, in the absence of the king. And in only one place, which was Venezuela in 1811, did they declare independence immediately. In all the other juntas, they talked about wanting to be caretakers in the absence of the king that had been taken over by Napoleon in the peninsula. In Brazil, this was also very different because the king and the whole court traveled from Portugal to Rio de Janeiro. So they established a new court in Rio. What happened in Peru and in Mexico was that the viceroys maintained control of the politics of the period. But in South America, there started to be a confrontation between the juntas and the viceregal power. Initially in the south of Peru, in what was then the Audiencia de Charcas, also known as Upper Peru, it was part of the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata. So the Junta de Buenos Aires sent troops to control it. And the viceroy in Lima organized an army with men from Cusco, Arequipa, and Puno to defeat the army sent from the Junta de Buenos Aires. And they met in a great battle in 1811 in the Battle of Huaqui. So this was, in a sense, the origin, the beginning of the process of independence of Peru. But Peru was the center of royalism, of the people that wanted to defend the crown. Now, the Junta de Buenos Aires had not declared independence at this point, but it was more about who controlled the very important mining region of Potosí. And that was what this was very much about. So wars continued throughout 1811, 12, 13, 14, 15. And in 1814, the viceroy in Lima, Abascal, sent troops to Santiago de Chile to control the junta there. In the intervening time, in the peninsula, there was a a whole period of change, of liberalism, with the creation of a parliament known the Cortes de Cádiz, that were called in 1810, with representatives from all over the empire, including the Americas. And these representatives were elected in Peru, and they were sent to Cádiz, and they wrote a constitution for the entire monarchy, for the entire realm, not just for Spain, but also all the other areas, not the Spanish Peninsula, but all the other areas in the Americas. And this is a constitution that was passed in March 19th of 1812. And this constitution was actually implemented in Peru. And this led to several changes in the way Peru was governed, but still remained within the royalist, loyal regions. What continued to happen was the wars of Napoleon ended in Europe by 1814, and then in 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. And the King of Spain returned to the court in Madrid, and he decided that the constitution that had been passed in his name was going to be abolished, and he returned to a very absolutist, a very determined and controlling system in the politics of the time. What happened then was the King of Spain sent a series of military battalions over from the peninsula, veterans from the wars against Napoleon, to take control of the northern part of South America. This was the New Kingdom of Granada and Venezuela that, as I mentioned before, had declared independence. So there was a very strong and intense war in that region. In the south, the Viceroy Abascal in 1814 sent troops from Lima to Santiago to finish with the junta in Santiago. And in Buenos Aires, the junta continued controlling the regions of what had been the main areas of the United Provinces, but not Paraguay, that had declared independence, and not the province that would then in future be known as the Provincia Oriental, eventually many years later to become Uruguay. In 1816, the junta moved from Buenos Aires to Tucumán and declared the independence of the United Provinces of South America, not of the Rio de la Plata, not of Argentina as we know it today, but they had ambitions for the whole continent. And they had a plan to liberate the whole of South America. And that plan began by helping the Chilean emigres that had been pushed out of Santiago into the province of Cuyo, the city of Mendoza, and organize an army there that would ensure the independence of Chile first in 1817 and 1818. The two battles of Chacabuco and Maipú were very important for the creation of a new republic in Chile. And from there, organize a new campaign against the Viceroyalty of Peru that would go through the Pacific coast. Now, during all the intervening years, there had been a lot of confrontation between the Junta de Buenos Aires and the troops organized in southern Peru, and a strong army had been created, a loyalist army. And this was going to change with the coming of the so-called liberating expedition that was led by José San Martín, and the navy put in by the Chilean Republic led by Thomas Cochrane and other English mariners. And this was going to be the first movement to liberate Peru. And this started in 1819 with a blockade of the whole coast of the Pacific, and eventually to the arrival of San Martin's troops in the south of the city of Lima and the Bay of Paracas in September 1820. And that is when the real wars of independence are going to begin in Peru, and there's going to be an intense confrontation that is going to take between 1820 until 1824 with the Battle of Ayacucho, and then to January of 1826, which is when the final troops leave the castles of Real Felipe in Callao.
Thank you very much, Natalia. I was wondering, you mentioned that in the build-up to the landing in Paracas, Cochrane joined forces with the independence force. But I was wondering, is there any trace of a position in the UK in the government in the UK, did they have any participation, or did they have a policy towards the independence process in Latin America?
Well, the British government was kind of had its hands tied because as part of the agreements of the Congress of Vienna, they had agreed to support the restoration of Ferdinand VII to the Bourbon crown of Spain. So they could not legally or openly or diplomatically support the independence of Latin America. So the British government did not aid in any direct way the battles for independence or the fight for independence. However, having said that, there was a lot of sympathy from within many in the UK, many in Britain, towards the idea of independence. Cochrane was himself a disgraced politician, and he was trying to get his way ahead in the world, but he was a contracted serviceman. So he went there for money and for booty, for finding economic rewards for his work. The British also were very important in the process of independence because of the London market. The stock market was a place where all these governments that were trying to achieve independence raised funds. But again, this was a private matter. It was not something that was done by the British government. So there were sympathies, and there had been many sympathies for many years. In fact, Francisco de Miranda had been in London for many years. San Martin had come to London. Many Spanish and Spanish-American emigres in London had managed to forge very important ties here in London, but it wasn't something that was sanctioned from the British government.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Very interesting. We hope to have you soon in another podcast.
Thank you.